Hey y'all, it is March the 25th, 2018, and I hope y'all having a beautiful Sunday morning or whatever it is day that you wind up seeing this. I hope it's really, really good. I want to let y'all know that, last night I made a couple videos and then deleted them before uploading them. They're actually pretty good videos, but I got a little bit flustered. I was talking about a lot of things, and that's the reason why I deleted them. I was talking about South Africa. I was talking about lust as well in people's hearts, to include my own heart, all right, which actually died away. I don't really have lust anymore. And I know that that's something that I should cover, but I need to gather my thoughts about it. I was trying to think, what's the most important thing that we could share today in this video? What's the most important? What do I got to put out right now? So I think that'll help everybody. And the most important thing that I could think of is actually something that my man, Gavin Saim, he was talking about it yesterday, and of course he talks about it a lot. Tries to drive the point home, and I can't help but to agree. As time goes on, I can't help but to agree more and more and more. And you can check out his videos, what he published yesterday. It's basically what I'm talking about. He covers a lot of things, to include injustice. People lots of times cry out for justice, to the point of complaining, to the point of whining, bickering about it, right? And whether or not they know it, the whining and the bickering and the complaining will lead to nothing. In fact, what it will lead to, inevitably, what I'm here to tell you, and you may not understand right now, is it will certainly lead to more injustice. Basically, what you're doing, what I had been doing, what everybody does, is we were asking for more injustice. Right? This lesson could be learned from reading the Bible, but also, reading plenty of different things. Right? And that if you ask anything or anyone for justice other than God, the one and only, his son's name is Jesus, or Yeshua, or it's a lot of things, all right? Don't get caught up on that. If you ask anything else at all, if you ask me or anyone else for justice, what you will receive is more injustice. And most people, when they receive the more injustice, they will, by human nature, instinctually turn around and point the finger at somebody, anybody, everybody. They need someone to blame. They need someone, right? Thing is, when you start to understand that God is responsible, if you will, God provides for everything on earth. Not only the blessings, but all the hardships. Not only the good things, but all the bad things. When you start to realize that, and you start to realize why it is he does that, you'll then begin to realize that there's no point in asking anyone, to include police, to include the military, to include the president of the United States, to include your mommy and your daddy, to ask them, to beg them, to bicker for, and to complain for justice. It does not make sense. Right? My mind goes back to a story in which, in the Bible, and I forget, it's hard to remember all the books and this and that, but there was a point in the Bible where the Israelite people were begging for a leader. They needed a leader, and I believe that leader became Saul, I want to say. It could have been someone else, but I think it was Saul, inevitably. But the thing is, they were begging for a leader because they needed one. They needed one desperately, right? God turned to them basically and said, look, that's me. I don't know what you're talking about. I am the leader, and there is no other one. And they were crying and complaining and whining and bickering. They were gnashing their teeth. They were tearing at their clothes. They were in grief and agony. They said, "We need a leader. We need one desperately. Not only just God, but we need one out here on earth. We need a daddy to provide us with justice." And God said, "Well, that's absolutely silly and preposterous. You don't need one, not at all. But if you're going to bicker and cry and complain about it and whine, understand that y'all, the Israelite people, y'all are my people, and everybody else is savage barbarians, and I don't really care for them, right? But since y'all are my people and y'all are begging and complaining and crying, I will bestow upon you a leader, and I believe that leader was Saul. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be. Of course, God was sincerely disappointed. All right, and you might note that ever since then, and even before then, people looking for justice and asking for justice and begging for it from other places than God, well, they will receive more injustice, and then they will not know why, and then they will turn around and they will blame and point the finger at everybody else. All right? And constantly, humankind has been going through this process. All right? We're definitely going through it today. One of the best examples is children over there in Parkland, the Parkland, Florida thing, in which there is, I repeat, no evidence that Nicholas shot anybody at all. Still is none. And when there is some, I will let you know about it. All right, because I can't wait to hear about it. I wish there was. I wish there was evidence, but there is not a stitch. All right, but nobody cares about this. Right? Most people are talking about whether or not to have gun control. Right? Technically speaking, that's beside the point. Right? Because this little boy right here, there's no evidence that he did anything. Right? He might have been a troubled little boy, and of course he's not perfect. Does not mean that he murdered everyone, especially speaking, and the fact is nobody can claim that they saw him do it. How can nobody claim this? How is that possible? All right. So you got the people of Parkland, the little students. Now, it's a handful of students, and certainly nobody cares, as far as the mass media, what the other students of Parkland have to say about anything. They only care about a handful, and they're willing to provide them with all sort of money and resources in order to get up on people's television screens and tell people that they're bad people. Tell the NRA that they're bad people, even though the NRA is quite literally constituted of millions of people across America. All right? David Hogg and his band of Bad News Bears cohorts are literally pointing the finger in the faces of millions and millions and millions of Americans and saying, y'all are responsible for people getting shot up in my school. Y'all are. Y'all are the ones responsible, and I want justice. You see how his justice will never lead to anything more but more injustice. You start to see that. You start to understand that he's a young boy, and I swear, back when I was 17, 18 years old, please don't listen to me about anything, because I knew nothing about anything. Nothing about it at all. And even though I knew nothing about anything at that point in my life, because I had been sincerely misled, I certainly didn't have the gall and the nerve to go up on national TV and call people out for the murder of my so-called friends, even though I don't know who murdered them to begin with. I certainly didn't have that nerve and that gall. Of course, when you're hopped up on all sort of money and who knows what else, and you're a David Hogg, you'll begin to say all sort of nonsensical, absurd things, and you'll bring all sort of injustice upon you. Right? I want to go back to the idea of asking people or anything else for justice. A lot of people don't believe in God. A lot of people never will. In fact, most people on earth never will. Right? And what they will do is they will ask the police, they will ask the FBI, or they'll complain at the police, or they'll complain at the FBI. They'll ask the military, they'll ask their preacher, they'll ask their mommies and daddies, and they'll ask everybody else, please give me justice. Malcolm X one time said, and a lot of people said something very similar, in which he said, if you ask anybody for freedom, if you ask another man for freedom, you will never ever be free. Right? Or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. You're really, what you're doing is you're tying a noose around your own neck. Right? And I want to make mention of people, all sort of people who are very smart out there. And I appreciate those people who know the ins and outs of the legal system that we have in America. And they provide a very good service here in the tribulation in that I certainly don't know the ins and outs. Right? There's no way that I could know. I cannot wrap my head around all these absurdities. I mean, because it is more than a mountain of absurdities. It's a whole world of absurdities, all mushed together. And that is our legal system. It does not provide any sort of justice at all. And in fact, it provides the opposite of justice. In fact, it's basically a system that allows us and enables us to put a noose around our own necks and lock our own selves up. That's what it does, quite successfully. Right? And there's people who can navigate through it, and there are good people who can do that. And there are very, very smart people who can do that. And I appreciate them. At the same time, what these people will all come to know one day, sooner or later, is that folks like Gavin Siam are well ahead of the curve. Folks like him out there realize through life experience, all sort of real life situations, that the more laws we ask for, the more that we will enable this system, a very absurd, a very perverse and perverted looking system, to lock us up, to put a noose around our own necks. All right? And just briefly, if you don't understand what I'm saying, go to any court of law. And the thing is, there might be a judge behind that little desk, and he might be a well-intentioned person. I just met one the other day, and he didn't want to throw me in jail, and I appreciate that. Right? Could be a well-intentioned person. However, his job is to operate. His job is to be a cog in a machine of absolute injustice, and he is paid to do that. Can you blame him for doing that? Not really, because it's a system. It's a machine of absolute injustice, irregardless. Right? Perhaps we should stop paying him to do that, and we should pay him to do something else. Right? But you'll go into a court of law, and you'll see, and literally what it is a religious, spiritual sacrifice. You don't know this? I mean, look at it. Look at the setup. You understand that they're all wearing black robes, and they don't even know why? They don't even know why. We don't know why either. We also don't know why. Why are they wearing black robes like it's some sort of spiritual sacrifice? Why is that? Some people with very shallow thought processes will say, well, this is because they need to differentiate themselves from other people so that you know who they are. Listen, I personally am not a retard, and I suppose that you're not a retard as well. You can walk into a room, and it won't take you very long to figure out who is who. They don't need to be wearing spiritual type, religious type, sacrificial robes. That's not even necessary, right? But that's only like a little taste of the absurdities that happen in our legal system, and it's absolutely preposterous. Right? Basically, like I said, what happens is we ask people to keep us safe. Meanwhile, there is not a safe place on the earth. Right? And so we go forth and we go even farther and we go even farther, and we ask people to keep us safe. Keep us safe on the roads. Please, please, please keep us safe on the roads. The roads are the most dangerous place you'll ever be in your life. Still. It's 2018. So we ask them to do that, and of course they don't have the tools to do that. All they have the tools to do is lock us up. To lock us up. I recently was trying to get my license, and I'm going to have to try and get my license again. Simply because I live in an upside-down Twilight Zone world. Right? And anybody who gets their license, their driver's license, they will be told, and they know to understand that driving on the road, getting from point A to point B, lots of times you have to, in order to make money, in order to survive, in order to provide for families and society. Driving from point A to point B, if you go to these weird backwards courts and DMVs and government offices, you'll begin to understand that driving, like I said, which is absolutely necessary in order to survive in most cases in this nation, that is described as a privilege, and you better know it. It is a privilege, right? In the laws of nature, by the laws of God, it absolutely isn't. That is your right to go from point A to point B, right? And a lot of people don't understand. They say, well, who paid for the roads? We do. We already did. We keep doing it, all right? Every time you go to a store, for example, I mean, technically you don't even have to pay tax, but you already do. You go to the store and you pay a person's money and they get money, and that is their living. All right, so they're going to want you to be able to get to the store. It's going to be in their best interest to make sure that there's a road that leads to their store. You understand? And on top of that, we're also taxed. And those taxes are supposed to pay for those roads. So the idea of driving being a privilege is wackadoodle. It does not make sense. It makes the opposite of sense. So that is, again, just another little taste. Just to finish up the video so it's not too long, that is another little taste of the process in which we enable folks to create more and 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 more laws. And we don't happen to notice that more and 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 more people get locked up, get put in jail, and guess what? If they don't go to jail, they get murdered. Not exaggerating. That is what happens. Right? That is the correlation. That is the cause and effect. So once you start to realize something that's very simple, that most people can't realize because they are absolutely blind from their hatred and their anger in their heart. Once you start to realize that, well, it becomes very simple. If you want to have less people in jail, if you want to have less lives ruined, if you want to have more justice, then what you will do is strip away at all the laws that are throwing you in jail and killing you as a society. You will aim for more, less laws. More, less laws is what you want. And it's that simple. Instead of creating all sort of man-made laws, what you'll do is you'll turn your eyes and your faith to God, and there is only one. And you'll ask Him for the justice, and you will receive the justice. And it will happen every time. And it is that simple, right? We live in a world that's a twilight world, and it's backwards, and is absolutely ran by Nazis, if you will. Right? We live in that world, and we have to exist in that world. We have to be very patient in that world, because we're having babies. Right? Some of us are having babies. So we have to live and exist in that world, and there's a lot of danger that we can put ourselves in by ignoring the laws that are already on the books. Right? Real briefly, I want to say, Gavin Siam refers to the police as the Blue ISIS, and he refers to all the courts and the legal, everybody involved, as Blue ISIS, and he's actually correct. They're the biggest terrorist group that exists in this nation. Blue ISIS. He is actually correct, and I know a lot of people won't understand that, but at the same time, it's important not to dehumanize police or judges or anybody else. All these people are people, and they deserve respect, and they deserve politeness and everything else like that. They do not deserve to be threatened with their lives as Black Lives Matters and all these other groups tend to do, Antifa and all the rest. They want to threaten these people's lives, and that is uncalled for. Right? These people are people. At the same time, they're part of an organization that's known as Blue ISIS, right? The largest terrorist group in this nation. Is creating the most crimes and the most injustices out of anybody by a very long shot, right? So seeing as we live in a twilight zone, in a nightmare, I tend to call it the tribulation, and so does the Bible. We know we're living in that. We know we're having babies. We know there's nothing that we can do about it. We are stuck. The best thing, what I would suggest to do, and the reason why I made this whole video, is that if you're having babies, if you're forced to do all sort of things to include putting them in schools and waste their time, sincerely. If that's what you're having to do because you're being forced to do it, because if you don't do it, someone will literally come in a uniform, a government uniform, and kill you. If that is the case, well, then that is the case. But what I'm imploring you to do is to teach your children better, to teach your little babies better, to have them understand, to create more laws, to even ask for more laws, to beg people and plead like little sheep. To do this, what it inevitably will do is create a domino effect in which you will ask for your own imprisonment. You will ask to be locked up in chains. You're basically, what you're doing is you're asking to be hung from a noose, before a mob of fiendish, angry, hate-filled people. This is what you're asking for. All right. No matter what's your intentions, that is indeed what will happen. Teach your children that we should have less laws. The less laws, the better. The less laws, the safer that we are. Please do so if you understand at all what I am saying, because the children are the future. The children will be used and utilized to create a better future, a more safer future, in which prisons aren't necessary. And we're going to leave out on that note. Prisons aren't even necessary. They do not bring justice, they bring injustice. You might say there's a lot of dangerous people out there. There's a lot of dangerous people and they might hurt other people. And so that's why we need to keep them in a room and have them be in a room and pay for it. And feed them and clothe them and shelter them forever and ever, probably, so that they can become even more criminal-minded. All right, you see how that's absolutely absurd? A lot of people don't. Okay? If there are dangerous people who mean to do other people harm, it's actually an atrocity to put them in a room and to keep them there and pay for them and all their resources. It is actually an atrocity. What you do is you find out for certain that that person is a danger to everybody else. You find out for certain, beyond a reasonable doubt. You have due process. You find out for certain that they are. You take that person, you put them in the ground, and you don't think about that person ever again. There is no need for prisons. The only thing a prison will ever do is lead to you being in it. Lead to your children being in it. Anyways, I'll holler at y'all later. It's March the 25th, 2018. We're all up in the tribulation, and no, that's not a joke. I'll holler at y'all a little bit later.